Welcome back. Now, we saw this week South African children going back to school for the first week of the 2026 academic year. And the use of artificial intelligence in our education system has, of course, seen growth with new innovative and also digital tools taking over more and more of the traditional ways of learning and teaching in our schools. But many schools still lack adequate and reliable digital connections, thereby hindering school-age children from fully utilizing artificial intelligence. But there are also many questions. How much does artificial intelligence matter inside the classroom setup, and how much does it matter in shaping future careers? Now, to help us answer some of these questions, we joined in studio this morning by Pauline Kunene, who's Executive Director of Nagarro in South Africa. Pauline, thanks so much for coming through. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, Sakina, for having me.
It's a very interesting discussion at the moment, but let me start by just gauging whether the Department of Education has an actual policy to deal with artificial intelligence in the classroom.
Yes, they do actually have a policy, but I think the issue is in implementation. So what we find is there are little pockets of world-class digital learning in South Africa, but if you go through to the public schools, there you'll find that they're still lacking stable internet access to devices as well as digital skills to actually relay those skills through to the learners. So yes, there are policies in place, but it's just a matter of access, a matter of the skills being relayed to the learners, and lack of access to devices. So it's actually the biggest barrier that South Africa faces, or the South African learners face, is not the ability, it's actually the access to the tools as well as the digital skills.
And I suppose therein lies part of the problem, because once again, that lack of access just perpetuates already existing inequality.
Inequality, yes.
Across our school system. But then, of course, there are other questions as well with regard to what would be, as per the policy, acceptable levels of AI-assisted learning as opposed to academic dishonesty altogether. It's a fine line, you know. How does the policy guide in that regard?
Yes, there are governance, AI, and ethical use of that. I think the question lies in whether we are teaching them to use the AI responsibly. I think the AI itself helps in terms of guiding, giving access to homework, guiding them with their research, improving their writing skills. But the learner, if they are not taught how to use AI responsibly with the ethical guidance, then it becomes a little bit useless. And as well
so that's the issue, isn't it, Pauline?
Yes,
because when you say, learners are assisted.
Yes.
Someone comes, you quickly, write the question, and you use, say, a ChatGPT.
Yes.
That can write the entire assignment for you.
Yes.
So how do teachers, one, gauge that? How do they assess that, given that there is permissible use of AI? But how do you go about, drawing that line in the sand once again with regard to what is permissible and when are you crossing the line?
So then again, I just want maybe reiterate the ethical guidance. So the various policies, the governance policies that are in place should be taught, but remember the human element remains essential as well. So the guidance from teachers, teaching them to still think critically. So AI still needs a person to think critically so that they inform ChatGPT and it gives them back the correct information. Part of critical thinking is also to do fact-checking, because AI, as it stands today, it may not give you the correct information, so you still need to have your research skills, you need to have a little bit of knowledge, so it doesn't really replace the human element of the teachers and the learners. So you still have to have that critical thinking in place.
You see, I'm confused because I can't see it in practice.
Yes.
Because, and I get what you're saying about critical thinking,
Yes.
and how you would then structure the question
Yes.
that you ask ChatGPT to assist you with.
Yes.
But if ChatGPT is doing the entire write-up,
Yes.
granted your point of
Yes.
you still needing to do some fact-checking,
Yes.
who did the assignment? Is
Yes.
it the learner or is it ChatGPT?
Well, it would be a percentage of a contribution from both. I think if you're looking from a learner perspective, it would probably build their confidence skills and improve their writing skills, improve on how they should research. And then when it comes to the teachers, there are mechanisms to check whether they have used GPT solely or whether they also use some of their knowledge and their skills. So I think it is a balance that you need to have, and it can be a very powerful tool in the inclusivity of the inclusive education in South Africa.
So in that space,
Yes.
are you aware of inset training for teachers
Yes.
in this regard? And again, as a teacher, how do you know that one, a learner has used ChatGPT? Two, to what extent they have done this? And three, when you are actually performing the assessment, how do you weight the scoring then?
Yes.
For a learner that has been assisted, because they can be vis-a-vis a learner in the same class who may not have access because they go home and live in an area where there's no internet access and therefore they don't have the same access. If you're dealing with those dynamics in the same class,
Yes.
how do you weigh that up?
I think, first of all, in the classroom or in a university setup, there will be rules in the school in terms of also the guidelines as well, in terms of certain assessments that they should be done in a certain way to achieve a certain outcome. Some of the outcome is also to build their knowledge, and some of it is to build their thinking, and some of it is to build their research skills, depending what the outcome is for that particular subject. So the school and the lecturer or the teacher will be the person to actually say, for this particular assignment, you are not allowed to use AI. So I think that with those guidelines, the ethical guidelines that will control and also level the playing fields for all the students.
And hoping the teacher would be able to tell the difference.
And hoping he'll be, yeah, well, they do, because some of them do get penalized for because teachers do check. There are mechanisms, as I've already alluded to, where they check whether AI has been.
What are those mechanisms? How can you pinpoint, how can you tell
Yes.
that there's been AI assistance in an assignment?
So there's systems where you can check for plagiarism, where it does connect or trace whether you got the information from a reliable source or whether you've copied a paper that is already there. Because AI, remember, is a system that we feed it information. So if you are going to be solely relying on AI, it will then take from the various sources that it has been fed. And if you don't do the proper fact-checking and the proper, reading through your assignment, then you will, without editing it, you will be found to have plagiarized the paper, copied somebody else's work.
It's absolutely fascinating.
It is.
Where we find ourselves right now. But Pauline, in terms of the digital gap between
Yes.
our South African classrooms and counterparts throughout the world, how big is that gap currently?
It's quite significant. But as I already alluded to, South Africa has already got pockets of world-class digital learning. And then I think with us, the public schools is the most concern. But that gap doesn't talk to our talent. It actually talks to our ability. That, having said that, our learners are really not lacking ability, they're lacking access to the tools, to the stable internet, to data. So that's the barrier. The barrier is access and not the ability. So the gap is quite significant.
And of course, we'd want to close that as soon as possible.
Yes.
The reality, though, is a different story altogether. But what would your suggestion be in terms of just how we approach AI, its usage in our classrooms, and of course, in a way that it benefits not just those who have access, but ultimately everybody, because we don't want to see this uneven spread, of quality in terms of certain aspects of our education, which is already a bugbear.
It is. So I would suggest there's a lot of strides that government has tried to make an impact on getting these devices and getting the access to the public schools and to rural areas and remote areas. And they've also solicited the assistance from private sector. Nagarro is one of the companies that invest quite a bit in our CSR initiatives, where we seek out the schools that are in socioeconomic challenging communities, and we take it upon ourselves to give those devices and laptops, tablets, computers, printers, all IT equipment to those schools. So I think if we consistently do that, if it's not going to change overnight, but if it's a consistent effort in making an impact in those various communities, I think we can close that gap of inequality.
I'll tell you what, I volunteer to go with you into a school, because I'd love to see this in practice.
Yes.
And ideally, one would go to a school that is fully resourced and one that is under-resourced.
Yes.
And just to see how these scenarios play out in both. So if it's something that we can do, I'd really love to see this in action, because
that would have been awesome. We've just given a school in Riverlea in December, and I'll invite you to the next one.
Please do.
I will do.
Please do, Pauline.
Yes.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Fascinating discussion on where exactly we are at with regard to the entry of artificial intelligence into the learning and teaching space. And thanks to Pauline Kunene, who's Executive Director of Nagarro in South Africa, talking to us about the use of artificial intelligence in our classrooms.